Hello and welcome to Rogue Voice, conversations that inspire and connect. I'm Tiffany Cooper.
And I'm Jessica Gomez. We are, Tiffany, what, about 40 days-ish, maybe a little bit
Oh,
shorter than that, to the election. I mean, we are, now you start to see that rhetoric ramp up and all of these things going on out in the world. And I just feel like in some ways we're more divided than ever, and we shouldn't be, right? There's so many things that should be happening to bring us together right now.
I can't think of a time where we're more divided. I mean, just like maybe 15 years ago, we were able to have conversations with people who disagreed with us with different views. And now we just become so polarized and to the point we can't even have a conversation. And I feel like that's so dangerous. We have to be able to, reach over on the aisle and be able to connect the dots and have a common ground that we can have these conversations and just be able to move forward as a nation. But to help us better understand political division and why it is important to support through diversity in politics, please let me introduce Marla Estes, Building Bridgers, and Gabriel Braet, Young Republicans of Oregon. Please welcome both to the show. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. I met Marla and both Gabe while I was running for the state senate, and boy, was that was quite the experience. And so I looked to folks like these two to really help me figure out really how to communicate that balance. And so I just think that the work that both of you do is really important. Marla, I'm gonna start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about bridging and why you created Building Bridgers?
Well, what happened to me is the morning after the election, so on November 9th, 2016, I just woke up with this thing. I have to do something about this political divide. And I wasn't political up till then. I kind of checked the blue boxes and figured other people could do my thinking for me. And I went down an Alice in Wonderland experience the last 4 years of really understanding what it takes to bridge. So it's not just holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It's really understanding myself, understanding ourselves, and understanding really what's right about the right, what's right about the left, instead of having these really strong hyper-partisan positions. So I worked for a number of years with Rob Schlapfer, and we did presentations about the political divide, and I learned an awful lot about what I didn't know about civics, about the issues themselves, about the parties themselves. What I did is, so we worked together for a number of years, and then last year I started Building Bridgers, which is really more of what I call the micro level, really understanding ourselves and our operating systems. And funny enough, one of the benefits is not political, it's personal, because I feel like I'm a different person in my relationships, in my family, in my organizations, in my ability to do teamwork. So it's actually starting from that level is a very beneficial thing.
That's so inspiring too, because I'm thinking like, you have all these tools to know how to, connect and have a conversation. What about your family? Have they been able to, use some of your practices to be able to have their own personal micro conversations with folks using your technique?
That's a really, really good question. And one of the things I've noticed with my kids is that they're much more able to handle nuance. So part of the problem with bridging is the splitting, like my side's good and right and correct, and the other side's the opposite, right? And they're much more able, I think, to say on one hand, on the other hand, and really see a bigger picture, which is to me more about reality than painting people in these one-dimensional situations. And I think they can apply it in their work situations, and they're a lot more able to see nuance, I would say, and the same with friends.
Great. So Gabriel, I want to shift and ask you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what prompted you to join Young Republicans of Oregon?
Yeah, so Tiffany, what I had done is I had started at Southern Oregon University. And Southern Oregon University is a very unique place in the Rogue Valley because it's a college, first of all, and then it's also in Ashland, which is a unique place. So Southern Oregon University is a unique place within a unique place, and there was no conservative representation while I was there. And so I decided I was going to start the Southern Oregon College Republicans. And that's actually how I met Jessica. That's how I met Marla, and both great people. And I got involved in the Young Republicans through that organization. Basically, they needed some more help because they were building from ground zero as well. So I got involved with them through that.
So, I mean, we're in a pretty, what I would call like left-leaning state right now. How are you guys, how is you and the Young Republicans, how are you feeling about where we're at in our state and sort of nationally, right? Because there's a lot going on, coronavirus, all of these different issues. How do you figure out what to focus on?
Jessica, that's a great question, and I ask myself that every morning. So there's clearly different issues with that within the state itself, right? So there's the fires that definitely hit every part of the state, and so that's something we definitely said, okay, we got to look at our forest management. We got to look at, it's a combination. We've got climate change. Yeah, we can focus on that. But what are the things that we definitely have power over? And that's the forest management. So that's something we can actually impact with policy. Okay, so that's something we can focus on. Other things are in Eugene, or not Eugene, it's Congressional District 4. It's from, I can't remember exactly the boundaries, but it encompasses Roseburg and Eugene and some of those central Oregon areas. It's the poorest district in the state. And so one of the challenges has been, how do we get that part of the state, which has had a suffering economy, to flourish? And one of the candidate who's running against Peter DeFazio, he's actually identified that if we reinvigorate our lumber industry, then we'll have a better economy in that area. And then there's obviously like Portland, that's a whole other thing. They've got the protests going on. How do you handle civil unrest? So it's pretty complicated. I think it's depending on who you are, what are the issues you care about, and then just where you are as well.
Yeah, I know, especially here in Oregon and lots of other states, I would imagine too, there's what we call like the urban-rural divide, which kind of adds some complexity to that. And, which is, again, we talk about these issues and they're really important, but we find it very difficult to gain any kind of consensus or even be able to sort of really listen to what people are telling us that maybe don't agree with our point of view. Marla, what are some of the obstacles that you find to bridging, and why is it hard for people to bridge, you feel like? I mean, why is that such a difficult thing right now?
So that could be a week-long workshop, but try to make it brief. The first thing, and it's not necessarily in order of relevance, but one thing, there is a lack of consensus in that some people do believe that bridging is not a good idea. And those are usually the extremes on either side, because their attitude is more like, we have to win at any cost. And what I found in general, this is only my opinion, is that either there's a sense like, and they'll find out that actually our ways are better, but there's other people, I would say, that think we're going to win and too bad for the others. And so the problem, there's so many problems with that, but one of them is gridlock. So just on a practical level, things don't get done because of what's called negative partisanship, which is basically, or they call it effective partisanship too, which is about feeling versus something more logical, is whatever the other side says, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, we see that a lot in Washington right now. I mean, it's all over the place. And, people used to talk, I know, about sort of, how our legislators used to be friends. I mean, even beyond, their work, that they were able to sort of transcend some of those differences and find solutions because of their relationships. And
Yeah.
in some ways that's,
Well, I also think, I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, Jessica, but I
yeah,
just want to add that I think also there's an underlying of power and ego, right? So the whole idea of not being able to, I'm going to say the opposite, out of just, holding on to the power or the ego. And I think that is an issue too, where people want to, this idea of power and suppression. So Gabriel, I want to ask you, what is your perspective in bridging? I mean, how important is this concept to the political process?
Yeah, Tiffany, this is a very, very important question. To me, it's number one. I think it's clear that we can't solve any issues if we can't talk about issues. And so I love getting involved with organizations like Marla's. I love working with people like you two, because unless we can come to a consensus on what are the facts on the ground, we are not able to argue about the details and the nuance within the policy. And that's actually where people disagree. Unfortunately, within the internet, we have all these, segmented and segregated communities that have different consensus of fact. And that just makes matters worse. So we can't agree on anything. And that's really a lot of trouble, because then we can't come up with solutions, we can't get better. We see that gridlock Marla was talking about. I think one of the other important things to note here is we don't have any trust in our institutions. And so with the lack of trust in our institutions, we're seeing people are going to these other communities that have their alternative facts, or they have whatever they consider truth that nobody can agree on. And it's a really, really challenging time that we're facing. It is also something that, as much as that's kind of dystopian, we've seen this before in the past where we have a lack of faith in our institutions. I think the best example of this within recent memory is after the Vietnam War. A lot of Americans, they had a lot of distrust in their government. They had a lot of distrust in their media. And I think that as Americans, we can recognize patterns that we've seen in the past and maybe look towards those for suggestions, for recommendations of what we can do now to come together.
Good point. That's great. Marla, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I do, and it kind of feeds into the second part of the other question is what gets in the way is what I call our personal operating system, so our neurobiology and our psychology. Because what I found over the years, and Jessica, you've been present for many of these hot discussions, Rob would present really good views. I don't want to say arguments, like look from the left, immigration is seen like this, look from the right, and this is where they have trouble, in a very, neutral way. And people would get so triggered, they'd either walk out, they'd go like this, I knew we lost them. And what I began to see is that until we did some kind of personal education about our own triggering, our own survival mechanisms, and that is seriously a week-long workshop, that we couldn't make any headway. So to Gabe's point, we need to be able to those conversations, but what I'm focused on, two things in my work right now. One is how to get people ready personally to have those conversations, to be truly opening to listening. And that doesn't mean being quiet while somebody else talks. That also means if I'm not any flavor, but say I was a liberal and Gabe was talking, but I already had a generalization about what a conservative was, and I might be quiet and listening and nodding, but I am not listening. I'm in rebuttal mode. I'm thinking, yes, but, or yeah, I'll just listen to this so I can seem tolerant. So my goal is to get people prepared to have the better conversations. And the other goal I have is that there is, like you said, Gabe, there's a lack in our institutions and alarmingly within the bridging movement, because by now I've been exposed to more at the national level. It's very left-leaning. It's not welcoming to conservatives. And that's a whole other conversation, but how do we get people really to the table in good faith, in really good faith, and how do they have, how can we cultivate people's buy-ins because it's hard to bridge. How do we get them to invest and to say, this is important so we can get out of gridlock. This is important so we can really exercise one of these beautiful human capacities of cooperation, which doesn't need to be compromised. That's what also gets as an obstacle, is people think, I'll have to compromise. And sometimes compromise is necessary, but what people don't understand is when you bring opposite ideas together and work them, you come up with new solutions. That's the creative force. That's thesis, antithesis, synthesis. How do we come up with out-of-the-box solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about like common ground. You know, what is our common ground, and where do we start from, and how do we, you know, kind of set ourselves up so we have some sort of base from which to look at things. Do you feel like that's really important in that work, Marla, or do you think it has more to do with sort of really taking the time to just understand each other and working through it that way?
The way that I approach it, which I haven't seen other places, there's other places who will make lists and say, what can we agree on? And that's great. Everything's great. But I prefer to get even down deeper. So one of the things I'm working with an ongoing group. My favorite thing is like monthly groups of the same people that meet, so we can have this education really. And one of the things I'm doing with this group is stopping generalizing. Right there, you start loosening these closed systems we all have to make headway, so there can be this cooperation, there can be this genuine working together on things. One of the things one of the students in one of my classes had, and he gave me permission to share this, is he was really anti-Trump supporters. Trump, but also every Trump supporter, thought terrible things of them. And once he saw this wild animal show on Facebook or something, where these guys in MAGA hats were taking a bucket off a bear's head at great risk to themselves. And he had thought, Trump supporters hate animals. I mean, you know, we make these really blanket statements, and it started loosening his idea. You know, so once you find out, oh, I'm wrong about this stereotype I've been doing, I think there's a natural opening, because it starts making a chink in this automatic closed system that we have. So I prefer to start working really as down deep and personal without dealing with issues yet, and get them ready for somebody like Gabe or somebody like that.
I totally agree. And when I have conversations with people who have different views than me, that is where I start, is the personal relationship. But also knowing the end goal is that when I have these hard conversations, the end goal is not to end our relationship, to end our friendship. Oftentimes you have these conversations and you're no longer friends, or you no longer can shake that hand. To me, that goal is to always remember that I want to still be friends. I value that relationship. I value that friend on a personal level. Before having that conversation that could easily ruin a friendship, which I think, you know, I've seen friends who have parted ways because they couldn't get to that personal level. They didn't have that understanding that at the end of the day, we may not agree, but I still care for you as a human being. Mm-hmm. I still respect your humanity over my policy, humanity. And so I think that's an issue. Gabriel, I want to ask you, you know, you are a recent graduate from Southern Oregon University. Could you talk about what it was like to be a conservative on campus? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, Tiffany, so I honestly only have one experience with one university. So my experience is, I actually didn't have too many problems. The university, they gave me some challenges, especially towards the end. I put together an event, and the university decided that they were going to put a disclaimer on my event saying they didn't agree with anything I had to say, basically. And I was like, hey, well, I didn't assume that, you know? So that was interesting. I've definitely had colleagues and friends at other universities who have had major issues getting funding. But primarily, I think the issue that I faced and that other members of the Southern Oregon College Republicans have faced is that there's a really negative feeling when they go into the classroom, whether that's coming from their colleagues, whether that's coming from their professor, that their opinions or their beliefs and their values are totally denigrated. And I think that comes from what Marla was talking about, where people, or I mean, you were saying you want to value the humanity over the the policy or the argument. And I think that's really unfortunate where we've gone with that, because we've decided, no, instead we're going to say that your argument is it is in contrary to my belief system and my values as a person. So I can't be a person due to your beliefs. And that's not American at all. I think that's like anti-American. And so it also comes from just, I've noticed from a broader perspective of my friends who have decided not to be my friends, they want to be correct before they want to be self-reflective. And I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in myself with not being able to be grateful for what I have. And I think it all comes down to being humble. You got to recognize that you're not actually this genius. You probably are just talking from something someone else said. And
Parrot talk.
Your relationship is more important than whatever Tucker Carlson said last night, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it parrot talk, where you secondhand smoke. It's not really formed views of yourself. It just sounds good, and basically letting someone else do the thinking for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that prevents you from having deeper conversations, because if you haven't really thought through the issues, how can you go deeper if you're taking someone else's views, right?
Exactly.
You can't have deep. I always call it deep analysis. How can you have deeper analysis of those?
I think it's also interesting if you just kind of listen to yourself. You start recognizing that there's two pieces of you, and there's one that's you, and then there's the one that's like this parents talk. And the more you engage with the parents talk, the less centered you feel as a human, and the further away from truth you actually arrive. So I'm all about being self-reflective, and I think that's what Marla's getting at, is you got to be empathetic, you got to be self-reflective, and then you can actually go forward with recognizing you actually probably don't know the solution. So
yeah, that's hard. Even for me and my husband, we talk at home all the time about a lot of these things, and it's hard to really do that self-exploration well enough to where you can be comfortable in all these different situations that we are in as humans right now. I mean, it's a big deal. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your work right now and how it relates to sort of the D side of the aisle? Are you doing anything, Gabe, that is jointly with those folks? What does that relationship look like between the groups?
yeah, so I'm involved with the Young Republicans of Oregon. That's just volunteer work.
Yeah.
So I do like campaign work and stuff there. But my day-to-day, I work with this organization called Free the Facts. And Free the Facts, they are a nonpartisan nonprofit, and they're based out of DC, but they basically just recognize, look, there's no truth. We can't agree on the facts. We're not going to get further. So they don't make any policy recommendations, but they say, okay, here's the data. Here's what we can agree on, whether that's Social Security. Social Security is going to be, this Congressional Budget Office has said that it's going to be insolvent, which just means it has no money, by 2031. So we have big issues to face, and we can't solve these if we're not able to have a conversation. And so Free the Facts, they're a great organization, and I'm happy to work with them. A lot of my colleagues, I'm sure, are disagreeing with me on tons and tons of issues, but we are at least able to sit down, have a conversation, and get dinner afterwards.
That's great.
That's good. At the end of the day, you still want to be friends and have that cocktail. You want to have that bourbon cocktail afterwards. So Marla, I want to shift gears. I want to ask you, are there universities or other institutions that have incorporated the concept of bridging into the curriculum?
Well, so, and this ties in a bit to Gabe's point also. There is a problem, a recognized problem, that most of the upper universities and the more elite universities are left-leaning, both in their staff and administration, and to a lesser degree, their students. So there is an organization that was started, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Gabe, you probably know them, Heterodox Academy. Yep. And they are very much trying to push through getting more diversity, more viewpoint diversity on campus. There's a man at Portland State, Bruce Gilley, who a couple of years ago tried to present a class called The Conservative Mind. Now, in my opinion, that's an interesting class. Whether you're conservative or not, shouldn't you learn about what the conservative mind is? And it was not approved. And he wrote a whole article about that. There's a woman also on the flip side. Her name's Ilana Redstone. She's at University of Illinois, and she's done a class called Bigots and Snowflakes. And she's starting to. That's right. I hope it was packed, but I think that she's starting to have the conversation. Although I haven't followed it, I have had some feedback that perhaps it was even, a bit framed from the left, but nevertheless, it's starting to have the conversation. But no, there's I think a few times ago, you guys talked about cancel culture or something like that. There seems to be, from what I am reading, a problem. And there's also an institution called FIRE, F-I-R-E, and it's about free speech on campus. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but they are really watching that too. Like what is not getting said, what's getting shut down on campus because it might be seen as an oppressive thing or a microaggression. Instead of, like Gabe, you pointing out, we need to talk about what is. And if people are, again, back to my, soapbox about people's personal triggering, if I am too triggered, literally, I cannot think.
Yeah. There's
something that cuts off in the brain that doesn't allow critical or rational thinking. So, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead what you were saying. I'm just thinking out loud what you were saying.
Yeah, so to me, it's like this Gordian knot, like how do we move things forward when we're so stuck in our survival mechanisms and our triggering that we can't hear the other, that we want to push away. There's something called confirmation bias, which we're wired for, right? We need a manual override or to be able, confirmation bias means that I embrace the ideas that support what I already believe, and I push away those ideas that don't. And there's all kinds of, social scientists have come up with 188 ways that we have cognitive biases, and that they're all running automatically. And like Heterodox Academy is really good at saying, they have a great clip about viewpoint diversity. So diversity is a big word right now, but not so much viewpoint diversity. When I ask attendees, have you ever heard of viewpoint diversity? People say no. Like, what's that? It means we need all the voices at the table to be able to see our own blind spots. That's how you counteract confirmation biases, to have somebody else's opinion and being open enough to say, oh, that person might know something that I don't.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that is very powerful. I find that part of that too is, that humility that you had mentioned, Gabriel, having that humility to be able to do that, right? So I think there has to be some groundwork before you can even acknowledge it. Like the self-reflective, how are we aware of our deficiencies, right? And say, I'm not perfect, and I believe this, but you know what? I have to come from a humble place and be open to that. But that takes humility to be able to say, let me embrace viewpoint diversity. You have to be open enough. So what is the intro before viewpoint diversity? Is there a precursor or prerequisite that, okay, you're going to be kind of humble? Are you open? First, are you open? If you're not open, then how do we get to viewpoint diversity? So exactly. I feel like that. Are you open? Like, when I have these conversations with people, the first thing I ask, they have different views than me, may I offer you a different perspective? Because I'm asking for permission rather than blaming and sharing and spewing. I'm asking. You can easily say no, but oftentimes when you're listening to someone, truly listening, then they're more willing to go, okay, well, I don't have to believe what you say, but I am open to a different perspective. I may not end up, signing up for that at the end of the day, but I'm open to listening to that viewpoint diversity, as you were mentioning.
What I tell people in my classes is try to be an anthropologist from Mars or have Zen beginner's mind and to say, you know, like I'm studying Russian, like say I'm studying the conservative mind. I'm trying to understand Russian. I have no background. How do I come to it fresh? I can have an opinion about it later, but unless I really understand it, how do I have an informed opinion? And the humility, and you know, some people use the word ego. If my ego is getting in the way, that I need to be right. And there's all kinds of reasons why we need to be right. It feels better than not knowing or being wrong, you know, but we have to have the humility and also the inner strength to go, okay, maybe I don't know anything.
Gabriel, you have a last word you'd like to add on to that?
I mean, I think that's a very deep question. You gotta be humble. You gotta recognize that you're actually useless and terrible. I mean, you know, like you are, you know, you're on this tiny little planet floating through space and the sun's trying to kill you. So like, what do you know? So you got to recognize that you're actually not as important as you might think. And I think that's the precursor to getting to a place where we can actually have a conversation, be humble, bow our heads and say, look, I might be wrong about here. Let me ask some questions about what I think.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I wish we could go on and on and on and on, and we will. So I want to thank you, Marla and Gabriel, for taking the time to talk with us today. I'm sure our listeners, just as much as Jessica and I, have learned so much from both of you. So remember to tune in to Rogue Voice online every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and connect with us on YouTube channel and our Facebook, where you can send us a message. And please join us next week to explore part 2 of today's discussion. So tune in, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.